Hey everyone, and welcome back to our third episode of our Prefects on the Couch. As you can see, once again we're in a different venue, but this week, and this time I'm sitting here alone. That's because this episode is a slightly different styled one. As per usual though, we have a fantastic lineup for you all featuring Enos Ndiaye, a future Sharks rugby player, Luke Moyer, the second highest ranked mountain biker in the world for his age, one of our marvelous math teachers, Mrs. Parker, and a very special musical number at the very end, so make sure to stay tuned. Without wasting any more time, let's dive straight into today's episode with Chris Bredsky getting some insight into the mind of Mrs. Parker. Thank you, Nathan. And here we are with Mrs. Parker. How are you, ma'am?
I'm good, thanks. Yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Tell me, how have you found teaching during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, it's been quite interesting. I think along with the pandemic, it's brought about quite a few changes, disruptions, but also innovation. So whilst there have been lots of good things, I think equally so there have been lots of tragic and sad occurrences as well. So in the context of all that is happening around us, I must say in terms of actual teaching during this time, it's been challenging. I think particularly at the beginning when we had sort of lots of confusion around what to do and when to do it, and the introduction of blended learning hasn't been easy. Your focus is split between the students you have in the classroom, the students that are at home, your technology, that it's working, that you're not destroying some of the technology whilst you're doing what you're doing, and that you're actually also focusing on, say in my classroom, on the desktop to make sure that what the kids are seeing at home is what you think they're seeing at home. So yeah, so you're trying to, your focus is split completely. Yeah. And I think another thing that I find quite difficult is when you have your students in the classroom, you're kind of in control of the situation, or you think you're in control of their learning. And whilst they're at home, you rely on their discipline and self-discipline and perseverance and that kind of thing. And that's hard because I'm pretty much a control freak, and when I can't control the situation, it does bother me that not everybody's on the same page in the same book. But yeah, but I think we've done remarkably well, given the circumstances. Mm. And then I think the last thing would be around your struggles in your own head, around you being in a situation in a school where you're able to teach, where you have the resources to do the blended learning, and you're mindful of the fact that there are so many millions of students in this country and teachers in this country, schools in this country that don't have that infrastructure. So you battle with that in your head as well. Yeah. So, but interesting times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now this is not the first time you've had a disruption to your school year. In 1986, you had to repeat your matric year. Now, tell me why this happened.
Okay, so just a little bit of background to the political landscape at the time. It was a time already in 1984, well, prior to 1984, in 1976 and in 1980, there were also student uprisings, and but in 84, 85, the uprisings were more around students uniting. In the past, the uprisings were quite pocketed in different communities. So you'd have your coloured community and the coloured schools having their own issues, and others. It was also related to the fact that 1985 was the year that elections were going to take place for the tricameral parliament, which was put into place to compartmentalise different groups. So you had a Department of Education, but you had a different department for white students, which was different to House of Representatives, which was for coloured students, House of Delegates, which was for Indian students, and black students didn't really matter. So it was within that political landscape that students and teachers were unhappy with school infrastructure. There were schools that had no electricity, no water, no proper buildings. We had no textbooks being delivered to schools, many schools. And so pretty dysfunctional. And it was the first time where you had all of these awareness programs and rallies, student political rallies taking place, and schools actually uniting, and students uniting, and also it was the first time that it was parents getting involved as well. And then there was a call for consumer boycotts. It was also a time of sanctions against South Africa, so the financial, economic climate in the country was really difficult for people. And out of all of that, we ended up in 1985, I think it was round about April, all kind of formal teaching stopped at my school, and at most schools, not all schools though, but at most schools in the Western Cape. It was pocketed throughout the country, but I'm specific to what I could recollect in Cape Town at the time. And we'd go to school every single day, even though it was a boycott of formal classes. And the school would set up, if there was no political rally to go to, and you could only go to the rallies if you had your parents' permission and that sort of thing. So obviously there was a safety aspect to it as well. And we had a real conscientization. For me, the political consciousness was amazing. What I learned in that time was really amazing. But you also had, it was really a difficult time, and then a decision was taken, because we hadn't had formal teaching for most of the year, that we would repeat the year. And it was not only the matrics that repeated the year. I had a younger brother who was just started high school in grade 8. Everybody repeated the year. So from grade 8 to grade 12, we repeated the year, and we got a new set of grade 8s in the following year, because we'd already had that process in place. So that bottleneck of students, that double grade, went through for 5 years. The school had to work within its limited resources and make do. So yeah, so that's the reason why we ended up repeating the year.
Now tell me about your mindset during that year. Were you scared for your future, or were you optimistic that some change could take place in the country?
I think there were varied emotions. I think on the one hand, anything that's different to the norm. Even right now, we're in this pandemic and things are different to the norm, so you kind of, there's a bit of anxiety around that as well. But also when you're young and pretty confused about where you want to be and what's happening around you, that's also going to bring about its own fear and anxiety. At the same time, when you're young, you think you're quite invincible too. So you think that you can get through all of this, and you find the strength in the unity of the people around you, that you're all in the same situation at the same time. I must say what did add to the anxiety was our parents. All parents want what is best for their children, and they want to give their children more than they had. I think that's like a common thread, I think, through most households, is that you want to give the best to your kids that you possibly can. And the same for our parents. So many of whom didn't understand the context and why this was happening, and it's my child that's suffering as a result, etc. So there was a bit of anxiety around the financial difficulties that lots of parents had at the time. And you also look around you, and you started out as, say, a group of 180, 200 matrics in 1985, and suddenly you come back in 1986 and 100 of you are left. Some left to go to private colleges in 1985. Others chose to write an exam that was set up by the education department, where certain venues were chosen, and they were actually guarded by the army while you went in to write, because of the volatile situation. And you ended up having all these mixed emotions as a result. But yeah, I suppose the politicization and the consciousness of that situation actually also made you feel like you've actually learned something out of this. And I suppose it created friction in relationships as well, because you're trying to explain to parents that don't see that kind of thing. Did create a little bit of undue pressure and stress and that kind of thing. Yeah, but on the whole, you were also optimistic because suddenly this emotional strength that you get out of being in a situation like this, and you feel like you're actually taking action, like you're actually doing something about something that is wrong. So I think that gives you that inner strength. Yeah.
And on that, did you feel at the time that you were making some sort of history? And looking back now, do you feel that you've played a significant part in South African history?
I'd rather us think in terms of being part of the history of the country. I think a necessary part of the history. But I also think at the same time the sacrifices we made in 1985, and that was around, there were lots of people that lost lives, students that in a lot of those political rallies turned really ugly, and confrontation between the army and students and that kind of thing. But I think in terms of the sacrifices we made and sacrifices that others have made in sort of the liberation struggle of this country, I think is minute, but a necessary part. And I think, but we have to look at it in the context, I think, of sacrifice in general. Right now, in this country, people are still being forced into sacrifice, whether it's your economic power, where you have no economic power, poverty, unemployment, corruption, that sort of thing. So in many ways, we don't see things as there's a sacrifice taking place, but there's a sacrifice taking place every day. And it's going to be a hard one to overcome. But at the same time, I do feel proud about what I learned at the school and the opportunities that the school gave me to open my mind up to what was happening out there, and teaching me about the political landscape and the socio-political landscape of this country. I think that was really, truly amazing for me.
And tell me how that experience has shaped you as a person today. That you talk about those things you've learned. Has it played a significant part in shaping you as the person you are today?
Well, I would hope that my experiences have taught me about being a similar kind of teacher in whichever institution I'm at. And I've only ever been to 2 schools in terms of a teaching capacity. And one is the very school that I attended, which was Adel Cressy High. And then going back to varsity for 4 years and going straight back into the same school. So I taught in that setup for 18 years. It was all I really knew until I arrived at SACS. I'd like to believe that I do create an environment in the classroom where we have healthy, open and transparent debates about controversial stuff, not so controversial stuff, that there's a safe space that's created within the classroom. And I'm also hoping that at the same time I'm opening the minds of my students to not only the curriculum, not only maths, to other things that are happening, and also just expose people to another reality that somebody else might be having in the same space, in the schools, in this country.
Yeah. And now, as an educator at SACS in 2020, how can we, as students of the school and colleagues of you, learn from your story, and can we learn more from what you had to deal with?
I think the main thread of my experiences has been around change, the willingness to accept change, to embrace change, and I think that's difficult. If you are, and particularly at a traditional school like SACS, there are things that have been done in a particular way for a long time, and I think that does make it a little bit more difficult to embrace that change easily. I think we've got a long way to go. We've got lots to do, but I also think at the same time that we are on the right path. We've particularly around things like diversity and transformation and inclusivity at the school. I think as much as one would say we're not in a good space at the moment, I actually think we're in a good space in terms of dialogue is there, that we're talking about it, that we're wanting to make changes, and yes, we'll decide how that change takes place, etc. But I think that in that way we are in a good space. And then if we look at the pandemic and the sacrifices that have been made by everybody in the situation, I think those sacrifices in terms of this pandemic are small. If we look at things that people live with every day, their reality every day, people who have lost loved ones during this pandemic. And if we then look and take that situation into our own homes, then maybe the little bit of inconvenience and stuff is not as big as we tend to think. People have lost jobs, etc. What we can do maybe in terms of contributing out there and just getting more involved is maybe exposing more of our students to the harsh realities out there and outreach programs, and actually getting more of our students involved. Because currently you do find it's a handful of students that are involved in the outreach programs, and staff as well. It's a handful of staff that are involved. It would be nice to kind of extend that program a little bit, sort of throw that net further out and wider, and get more people caught up in that, just so that there's a better understanding of what's happening in the country.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, ma'am.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much to both Chris and to you too, ma'am. It's absolutely incredible, and thank you so much, ma'am, for being able to share your story with us. It's amazing that you've been able to play a part in changing this country's history, and then still being able to come back, share your knowledge with us and experiences with us too. So thank you very much for that. Next, we head over to Memorial A, where Bradley Virgin unpacks the mind of a future Sharks rugby player, Enos Ndiaye.
Thanks, Nate. Here I am on the beautiful Mem A field, looking green as ever, with one of SACS's top prospects in Enos Ndiaye, Western Province Craven Week player last year, and now a signee with the Sharks Academy. So Enos, what got you into rugby in the first place?
First of all, Brad, thank you so much for that introduction. I really do appreciate it. A lot of people don't know this, but from the age of 7 to 10 years old, I was a big hockey fanatic, and I loved hockey, and I was really determined and dedicated to pursuing a career and a sport commitment to hockey for the rest of my schooling years. But as you could assume, I was quite a big boy in my grade 1 to 3 years, and the coaches realized that, and they saw that maybe a switch to different sports such as rugby would be better, and they kept pestering me, and it took 3 years for me to finally just attend one practice. And after that practice, I haven't looked back, and I've really enjoyed the sport, and I'm really glad that I didn't make the switch, because I can't imagine myself playing hockey now. But yeah, that's how I got into rugby.
Extremely interesting. I mean, seeing a huge guy like you having to bend over for the little might be quite the sight.
Yeah.
But Enos, what is your favorite moment playing rugby at SACS?
I think my favorite moment by far has to be beating Bishops in under 15 away, and that was a really special game. First of all, for the way we won it in the last minute, and that game put us on our way to a triple crown and to end off a special season. And I think I'll never forget that game, because I know there's a lot of emotion behind that game, and we had a lot of support. So I was very thankful for the boys for pulling through for that game and getting us across the finish line.
Yes, that's great to hear. Some of that fighting spirit shown there, winning, fighting until the end. So Enos, you've obviously signed with the Sharks, a really, really good franchise with some great players. So where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Thank you, Brad. I do hopefully want to play a few senior games, and I want to get a few senior caps under my belt at the age of 23, and which will be 5 years from now. And I just do hope to by then also have a degree, and hopefully by then, I can see where my rugby takes me.
Yes, I think that's important to note. You're a nice, well-rounded gentleman, and it's great to see. I hope everything for the best for you in the future.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Nate. Back to you.
Thanks so much, guys. That's awesome, Enos. I mean, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, and we're backing you all the way and wishing you the very, very best for the next step in your career. And I have no doubt that we'll all be keeping updated as to how you get on. Following that is another one of SACS's superstar sportsmen, Luke Moyer, being interviewed by none other than the Gift Nkulu.
Thanks, Nato. So as he said, I'm here with Luke Moyer, currently ranked 2nd in the world for mountain biking. We got him here for you today just to get a more personal insight on his life. So Luke, first question, how did you get into mountain biking?
I got into mountain biking through my dad. Always saw my older brother riding around the block, so always wanted to be like him, and my dad put me on the bike and straight away loved it. Always raced my older brother around the block, and
Cool. Also, what's been your proudest achievement so far, or the greatest moment?
Last year I qualified for World Champs and I ended up 5th place, which was quite an achievement for a South African and being the age I was back then. Yeah, so that was my biggest achievement ever.
Alright. Oh, and lastly, what does the future hold for you in mountain biking? Any plans?
There's lots of things we want to do in the future. Super keen to get over to Europe and start getting on some factory teams there, and it's looking super cool, and yeah, there's lots of stuff we want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gift, and thank you, Luke. I think we can all agree, Luke, that your achievements really do speak for themselves. We're all extremely proud of everything you've achieved, even as just a 17-year-old kid, and we wish you the very, very best for what lies ahead for you in your career. Now, if you guys haven't noticed, we haven't interviewed someone from our incredible music department yet, and that is because we've saved him to finish off today's episode. We have the current Walter Swanson title holder and previous Christopher Brown concert winner, Sebastian Long, doing what he does best with his clarinet. Well, other than that, that's all from me. And once again, thanks to everyone who has watched. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week. Seb, over to you.